The art of natural attraction. How to be genuinely captivating. Picture this. You walk into a room, and without saying a word, people notice you. Not because you're the loudest, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because there's something different about your presence. Something authentic, something magnetic. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this is another video about pickup lines or manipulation tactics, let me stop you right there. What I'm about to share with you comes from a philosophy that's over 2,000 years old, tested by emperors, slaves, and everyone in between. It's about becoming genuinely captivating, not through tricks or techniques, but through the ancient art of Stoicism. Here's what most people get wrong about attraction. They think it's about what you do to other people. They focus on the perfect thing to say, the right body language, the clever joke that'll make everyone laugh. But the Stoics understood something profound that modern society has forgotten. True attraction isn't about what you do to others, it's about who you become for yourself. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in his personal journal, later known as Meditations, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was working on himself, and that work made him one of the most respected leaders in human history. I've spent years studying charismatic people, and here's what I've discovered. The most naturally attractive individuals aren't trying to be attractive at all. They're focused on something much deeper. They're focused on becoming the kind of person they themselves would respect. And that transformation, that internal work, creates an external magnetism that no technique or trick can replicate. Today, we're going to explore how the ancient Stoics understood the art of natural attraction. We're going to discover why desperation repels while authenticity attracts, how self-mastery creates an irresistible presence, and why the people who stop caring about being liked are often the most liked of all. This isn't about changing who you are, it's about becoming who you truly are beneath all the social conditioning and fear. The Stoic path to natural attraction begins with a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of asking, how can I make people like me? The Stoic asks, how can I become worthy of respect? Instead of, what should I say? They ask, what kind of person should I be? This shift changes everything, because when you focus on becoming rather than appearing, something magical happens. You develop what the Stoics called gravitas, a natural weight of character that draws people toward you like gravity. So if you're tired of feeling like you're performing for others, if you're exhausted from trying to be someone you're not, if you want to discover the secret of those rare individuals who seem effortlessly magnetic, then this video is for you. We're about to embark on a journey that will transform not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. The ancient Stoics had a secret that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. They knew that the most attractive quality a person can possess isn't beauty, wealth, or even intelligence. It's something much rarer and more powerful: authentic self-possession. When you truly know who you are and live in alignment with your values, you become magnetic in a way that can't be faked or manufactured. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, wrote these words: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't just philosophical wisdom. It was the foundation of his natural authority. People were drawn to him not because he demanded their attention, but because he had mastered the art of inner composure. He understood that true power comes from within, and that understanding radiated outward in everything he did. The Stoics recognized that most people live their lives at the mercy of external circumstances. They're happy when things go well, devastated when they don't. They seek approval from others because they haven't learned to approve of themselves. They're constantly reacting to life instead of responding from a place of inner stability. But when you encounter someone who has developed inner composure, someone who remains steady regardless of external storms, you can't help but be drawn to them. This is why desperation is so repulsive. When someone desperately needs your approval, your attention, your validation, what they're really showing you is that they haven't learned to validate themselves. They're announcing their inner emptiness, their lack of self-respect. And paradoxically, the more desperately they seek your approval, the less likely you are to give it. Contrast this with someone who has developed what Epictetus called the discipline of desire. This person has learned to want what they have and to find contentment within themselves. They're not performing for you, they're simply being themselves. They don't need your approval because they've learned to approve of themselves. And this self-possession, this inner fullness is magnetic. The Stoic understands that we cannot control how others perceive us, but we can control who we choose to be. This acceptance of what is and isn't within our control creates a profound shift in energy. Instead of the anxious, needy energy of someone seeking validation, we project the calm, centered energy of someone who knows their own worth. When Seneca wrote his letters to Lucilius, he wasn't trying to impress his young friend. He was sharing hard-won wisdom about the art of living well. And it's precisely this lack of pretense, this genuine desire to be helpful rather than impressive, that makes his letters so compelling even today. The most attractive people are often those who have stopped trying to be attractive and started trying to be useful. This doesn't mean being passive or withdrawn. The Stoics were some of the most engaged, active people in history. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire. Seneca was a successful businessman and advisor. Epictetus taught students who traveled from across the Mediterranean to learn from him. But their engagement with the world came from a place of inner strength rather than inner need. The foundation of Stoic magnetism is this: when you're complete within yourself, you have something genuine to offer others. When you're empty within yourself, you can only take from others. And people instinctively sense the difference between someone who wants to give and someone who needs to take. Now, let's explore how this philosophical foundation translates into practical magnetism. The Stoics understood that attraction isn't about perfection, it's about mastery, specifically self-mastery. And the first area where this mastery must be developed is in our emotional responses. Self-mastery is the cornerstone of natural attraction, and it begins with emotional regulation. The Stoics understood that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can control how we respond to what happens to us. This ability to choose your response rather than being controlled by your impulses is one of the most attractive qualities a person can develop. Think about the people in your life who you find most compelling. Chances are they're not the ones who explode in anger at every frustration or dissolve into tears at every disappointment. They're the ones who remain steady in the storm, who respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. There's something deeply attractive about emotional stability because it signals inner strength and reliability. When Marcus Aurelius faced the challenges of ruling an empire, dealing with betrayal, managing military campaigns, and confronting personal loss, he didn't respond with emotional outbursts. He responded with measured consideration. He felt the emotions, but he didn't let the emotions make his decisions for him. This emotional mastery wasn't about suppressing feelings, it was about not being enslaved by them. The Stoic approach to emotional regulation isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about developing what they called appropriate emotions. When something genuinely sad happens, it's appropriate to feel sad. When something is genuinely frustrating, it's appropriate to feel frustrated. But it's not appropriate to let these emotions hijack your judgment or dictate your actions. This emotional mastery creates attraction for several reasons. First, it makes you safe to be around. People can trust that you won't explode, that you won't become vindictive, that you won't make important decisions based on temporary feelings. Second, it makes you interesting. Someone who can remain calm in chaos naturally draws attention. Third, it makes you useful. When others are losing their heads, you become the person others turn to for stability and guidance. But here's where many people get Stoicism wrong. They think it means becoming emotionally numb or pretending everything is fine when it's not. True Stoic emotional mastery is actually about becoming more emotionally intelligent, not less emotional. It's about feeling deeply but responding wisely. Seneca faced exile, the loss of his fortune, and eventually death. Yet he maintained his composure and continued to contribute meaningfully to those around him. This wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he had learned to separate his emotional experience from his response. He could feel disappointment without becoming bitter, face loss without becoming despairing, encounter injustice without becoming vengeful. This kind of emotional mastery also allows for genuine vulnerability. When you're not controlled by your emotions, you can choose when and how to share them. Vulnerability becomes a choice rather than an accident. And chosen vulnerability is far more attractive than emotional incontinence. The person who has developed emotional self-mastery can acknowledge their mistakes without being defensive, accept criticism without becoming hostile, and admit uncertainty without appearing weak. They can say, "I don't know," when they don't know, "I was wrong," when they were wrong, and "I'm struggling with this," when they're struggling. This honesty is magnetic because it's so rare. Most people are so busy defending their ego that they can't afford to be honest about their limitations. But the person who has developed inner security can afford to be honest about both their strengths and their weaknesses. This honesty creates trust, and trust is the foundation of all meaningful attraction. The Stoics also understood that true strength often looks like gentleness. When you're secure in your own power, you don't need to prove it constantly. You can be kind to those who are rude to you, patient with those who are slow to understand, and generous with those who have nothing to offer in return. This isn't weakness, it's the ultimate expression of strength. When Epictetus was beaten by his master, he didn't respond with violence or hatred. He responded with understanding and eventually with teaching that would influence thousands of students. His response to suffering wasn't to become bitter, but to become wiser. This transformation of pain into wisdom, of adversity into strength, is one of the most compelling stories the human spirit can tell. The self-mastery of the Stoics also extends to their relationship with pleasure and pain. They understood that both are temporary experiences that don't define us. The person who isn't controlled by the need for pleasure or the avoidance of pain has a freedom that others find attractive. They can enjoy good things without being attached to them, and endure difficult things without being broken by them. This brings us to one of the most important aspects of Stoic attraction: presence. When you're not constantly worried about past regrets or future anxieties, when you're not desperately seeking the next pleasure or frantically avoiding the next pain, you can be fully present in the current moment. And presence is magnetic. In our distracted age, the ability to give someone your complete attention has become a superpower. When you're talking to someone who is truly present with you, who isn't checking their phone, who isn't thinking about what they're going to say next, who isn't judging you or trying to impress you, it's a remarkable experience. You feel seen, heard, and valued. The Stoics developed this presence through their practice of attention. They understood that the present moment is the only place where life actually happens, and they trained themselves to live there rather than in the stories they told themselves about the past or future. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." This wasn't about ignoring planning for the future or learning from the past. It was about recognizing that the only moment you can actually influence is the one you're in right now. When you fully inhabit the present moment, you become fully alive. And aliveness is attractive. The practice of focused attention also develops what we might call conversational magnetism. Instead of waiting for your turn to speak, you're actually listening to understand. Instead of trying to think of something clever to say next, you're genuinely curious about what the other person is sharing. This shift from performing to connecting transforms every interaction. People can sense when you're truly listening to them versus when you're just waiting for your turn to talk. True listening is a gift you give to another person, and people are naturally drawn to those who give rather than take. When you listen with complete attention, you're saying to the other person, "You matter. What you're sharing is important. You are worth my full presence." This message is incredibly powerful. The Stoics understood that confidence isn't about believing you're better than everyone else. It's about accepting yourself exactly as you are while continuing to work on becoming who you want to be. This acceptance creates an unshakable foundation that others find deeply attractive. True confidence comes from acceptance, not from achievement. The person who can only feel good about themselves when they're winning, when they're being praised, when everything is going their way, is actually revealing deep insecurity. Their confidence is conditional, dependent on external circumstances. But the person who has learned to accept themselves unconditionally has developed real confidence. The Stoics practiced what they called the discipline of assent. This meant carefully examining their judgments about themselves and the world, accepting what was true and rejecting what was false. They didn't waste energy arguing with reality or pretending to be something they weren't. This acceptance of reality, including their own limitations, paradoxically made them more powerful. When you accept that you're not perfect, you stop wasting energy trying to appear perfect. When you accept that you can't control how others perceive you, you stop exhausting yourself trying to manage their perceptions. When you accept that failure is a part of growth, you stop being paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. This acceptance frees up enormous amounts of energy that can be redirected toward actually improving yourself and contributing to others. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's most influential teachers, understood that external circumstances don't determine your worth. He developed an inner freedom that no external force could touch. This inner freedom is what allowed him to teach with such authority and attract students from across the ancient world. The confidence that comes from acceptance is qualitatively different from the confidence that comes from achievement. Achievement-based confidence is fragile because it depends on continued success. Acceptance-based confidence is robust because it doesn't depend on external validation. The person with acceptance-based confidence can fail without being crushed, be criticized without being devastated, and face uncertainty without being paralyzed. This kind of confidence is attractive because it's stable. People are drawn to stability in an unstable world. When you're grounded in self-acceptance, you become a source of calm in the chaos of life. Others sense that you're not going to fall apart when things get difficult, that you're not going to become desperate when things don't go your way. The Stoics also understood the difference between confidence and arrogance. Arrogance is actually a form of insecurity that needs to put others down to feel superior. Confidence has no need to diminish others because it doesn't derive its strength from comparison. The confident person can celebrate others' successes without feeling threatened, acknowledge others' strengths without feeling diminished, and learn from others without feeling inadequate. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man in his world, consistently wrote about his own shortcomings and his need to continue learning and growing. This humility wasn't weakness, it was the ultimate expression of strength. Only someone truly secure in themselves can afford to be that honest about their limitations. The acceptance that creates true confidence also allows for genuine curiosity about others. When you're not constantly defending your ego or trying to prove your worth, you can be genuinely interested in other people's experiences, perspectives, and stories. This curiosity is attractive because it makes others feel valued and interesting. People are drawn to those who make them feel good about themselves, and one of the best ways to make someone feel good about themselves is to be genuinely curious about who they are. When you ask questions, not to show off your own knowledge, but to genuinely understand another person's experience, you create a connection that goes beyond surface-level interaction. The Stoics practiced this kind of curiosity about human nature in general. They were students of psychology before psychology existed as a formal discipline. They observed how people behaved, why they made the choices they made, what motivated them, what frightened them. This understanding of human nature made them more effective leaders, teachers, and friends. But their curiosity wasn't clinical or manipulative. It came from a genuine recognition that every person they encountered was fighting battles they knew nothing about, carrying burdens they couldn't see, and trying to navigate life with whatever tools they had been given. This compassionate curiosity created deep connections with others. When you combine self-acceptance with genuine curiosity about others, you create the conditions for meaningful relationships. You're not trying to prove anything so you can focus on understanding. You're not defending anything so you can focus on connecting. You're not performing anything so you can focus on being present. This brings us to one of the most powerful aspects of Stoic attraction, the creation of value through virtue. The Stoics understood that the most attractive thing about a person isn't what they can get from the world, but what they can give to it. The ancient Stoics organized their philosophy around 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These weren't abstract concepts, but practical qualities that made them valuable to their communities and attractive to others. When you develop these virtues, you become someone who naturally draws others because you have something genuine to offer. Wisdom, the first virtue, isn't about knowing everything or having all the answers. It's about having good judgment, seeing situations clearly, and understanding what matters most. The wise person can distinguish between what's important and what's merely urgent, between what's worth fighting for and what should be let go. This wisdom makes them a valuable counselor and companion. People are naturally drawn to wisdom because it helps them navigate their own challenges. When you've developed the ability to see clearly, to think before reacting, to understand the long-term consequences of short-term decisions, others will seek your perspective. But this wisdom must be earned through experience and reflection, not proclaimed through arrogance. The wise person also knows the limits of their knowledge. They can say, "I don't know," without feeling diminished. They can change their mind when presented with better information. They can admit when they're wrong without feeling like they're losing face. This intellectual humility is far more attractive than the brittle certainty of someone who always needs to be right. Justice, the second virtue, is about treating others fairly and doing your part to create a better world. The just person keeps their word, honors their commitments, and stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult. They don't take advantage of others' weaknesses or exploit others' trust. This reliability makes them someone others want to be around. In a world where so many people are focused on what they can get, the person focused on what they can give stands out dramatically. When you're known as someone who keeps their promises, who treats everyone with respect regardless of their status, who can be trusted with secrets and responsibilities, you become invaluable to your community. Justice also means standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. The just person doesn't remain silent when they witness bullying, discrimination, or abuse. They use their voice and their influence to protect the vulnerable. This moral courage is deeply attractive because it signals strength of character. Courage, the third virtue, isn't just about physical bravery. It's about the willingness to do what's right even when it's difficult, to face hard truths even when they're uncomfortable, to take necessary risks even when you're afraid. The courageous person doesn't let fear make their decisions for them. This kind of courage is magnetic because most people spend their lives avoiding difficulty, hiding from hard truths, and being paralyzed by fear. When you encounter someone who faces life head-on, who doesn't shrink from challenges, who maintains their integrity even when it costs them something, you can't help but be impressed. Courage also means being willing to be vulnerable, to admit when you're struggling, to ask for help when you need it. It takes courage to show up authentically in a world that often rewards pretense. The person who can be real in a world of artifice naturally draws others who are hungry for authenticity. Temperance, the fourth virtue, is about moderation and self-control. It's the ability to enjoy good things without being controlled by them, to have enough without needing excess. The temperate person isn't driven by compulsions or addictions. They can enjoy a good meal without overeating, appreciate success without becoming arrogant, experience pleasure without becoming dependent on it. This self-control is attractive because it signals inner strength and reliability. The person who can moderate their own behavior can be trusted to moderate their behavior toward others. They won't become obsessed, vindictive or destructive when things don't go their way. Temperance also means knowing when enough is enough, whether we're talking about work, entertainment, consumption, or even relationships. The temperate person doesn't need to have everything. They can appreciate what they have. This contentment is attractive in a world full of people who always need more. When you develop these four virtues, you become someone who naturally creates value wherever you go. You make situations better by your presence. You help others think more clearly, act more justly, face challenges more courageously, and find balance more readily. This value creation is the foundation of natural attraction. The Stoics understood that people are drawn to those who make their lives better, not those who make their lives more complicated. When you're focused on developing virtue rather than seeking attention, you naturally become someone others want to be around. You become useful, and usefulness is one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess. But this usefulness isn't strategic or manipulative. You're not being helpful in order to be liked. You're being helpful because that's who you are. The virtue has become so integrated into your character that you can't help but express it. And this authenticity makes the virtue even more attractive. This brings us to one of the most important aspects of Stoic attraction, thinking in the long term. While most people are focused on immediate gratification and short-term results, the Stoic is playing a much longer game. The Stoics understood that meaningful relationships, like meaningful achievements, are built over time through consistent action. They didn't try to impress people with grand gestures or dramatic displays. Instead, they focused on being reliable, day after day, year after year. This consistency creates a kind of compound interest in relationships. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, he wasn't thinking about how they would be received by posterity. He was simply doing the daily work of self-examination and character development. But it's precisely this lack of concern for immediate recognition that made his thoughts so powerful. He was focused on becoming, not appearing. The long-term approach to relationships means focusing on who you're becoming rather than how you're being perceived. It means making decisions based on your values rather than your impulses. It means investing in your character even when no one is watching, because you understand that character is what creates lasting attraction. This long-term thinking also applies to how you treat others. Instead of trying to impress people in individual interactions, you focus on being consistently trustworthy, helpful, and genuine. You understand that reputation is built through hundreds of small interactions, not a few spectacular performances. The person who thinks long-term can afford to lose in the short term. They can admit when they're wrong because they know that honesty builds trust over time. They can help others without expecting immediate reciprocation because they understand that generosity creates goodwill that compounds over years. They can invest in relationships that may not pay immediate dividends because they know that the best relationships often take time to develop. This long-term perspective also creates patience, and patience is attractive. The patient person doesn't need everything to happen immediately. They can wait for the right opportunity, the right relationship, the right moment to act. This patience isn't passive, it's strategic. They're using the waiting time to continue developing themselves and preparing for opportunities. Seneca spent years building his fortune, his reputation, and his influence. He didn't try to become wealthy overnight or demand immediate recognition for his wisdom. He played a long game, consistently making decisions that would serve him well over decades rather than days. This long-term thinking allowed him to weather temporary setbacks and build lasting success. The long-term approach also means being willing to invest in others without expecting immediate returns. The Stoic teacher doesn't just share wisdom with those who can benefit them immediately. They plant seeds of wisdom wherever they go, understanding that some of those seeds may not grow for years or decades, but when they do grow, they'll create immense value. This investment in others' growth and development is one of the most attractive qualities a person can possess. When you're genuinely interested in helping others become their best selves, when you share knowledge freely, when you celebrate others' successes without needing credit, you become someone others want to be around. The long-term thinker also understands that consistency is more impressive than intensity. The person who exercises every day for a year is more impressive than the person who exercises intensely for a week and then quits. The person who is consistently kind is more trustworthy than the person who is occasionally dramatically generous. Small, consistent actions compound into remarkable results. This consistency extends to your character and your values. The person who stands for the same things year after year, who can be counted on to respond to similar situations in similar ways, who doesn't change their principles based on convenience, becomes someone others can rely on. This reliability is magnetic because it's so rare, but consistency doesn't mean rigidity. The Stoic is consistent in their values, but flexible in their methods. They adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining their core principles. This combination of constancy and adaptability makes them effective leaders and attractive companions. The long-term approach to attraction also means being patient with your own development. You understand that becoming genuinely attractive, developing real charisma, building meaningful relationships all take time. You don't expect to transform overnight, and you don't get discouraged when progress seems slow. You trust the process and keep doing the work. Now let's translate these philosophical principles into practical daily practices that will develop your natural magnetism over time. The transformation from someone who tries to be attractive to someone who naturally is attractive doesn't happen through wishful thinking or occasional efforts. It happens through daily practices that gradually reshape your character and presence. The Stoics were masters of practical philosophy, and they developed specific exercises that modern neuroscience now confirms can literally rewire your brain for greater confidence, emotional regulation, and social magnetism. The first practice is morning reflection. Before you engage with the world each day, spend 10 minutes considering who you want to be in your interactions. This isn't about planning what you'll say or do to impress others. It's about setting an intention to embody your values regardless of how others respond. Marcus Aurelius began each day by reminding himself of his principles and preparing mentally for the challenges he might face. Ask yourself, how do I want to show up today? What kind of energy do I want to bring to my interactions? What values do I want to embody? If I face criticism today, how do I want to respond? If I encounter someone who needs help, what kind of help can I offer? This preparation isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about ensuring that your responses come from your best self rather than your reactive self. The second practice is mindful attention during conversations. Choose one conversation each day where you practice giving your complete attention to the other person. Put away your phone, stop planning what you'll say next, and listen with genuine curiosity. Notice when your mind wanders to yourself, your image, or your response, and gently redirect your attention to understanding the other person. This practice develops what the Stoics called prosouche, or continuous attention. When you can maintain focused attention in conversation, you develop a presence that others find magnetic. You're not performing, you're connecting. You're not waiting for your turn, you're genuinely interested in their turn. The third practice is evening review. Before you sleep, spend a few minutes reflecting on your interactions from the day. Not to judge yourself harshly, but to learn. When did you respond from your best self? When did you react from insecurity or ego? What can you learn from these experiences? Seneca practiced this nightly review and credited it with much of his personal growth. Ask yourself, when did I feel most authentic today? When did I feel like I was performing or pretending? What triggered my insecurities? How did I handle challenges to my ego? What did I learn about myself and others? This reflection helps you identify patterns and gradually shift toward more authentic responses. The fourth practice is voluntary discomfort. Once a week, deliberately choose a small discomfort to build your resilience and reduce your dependence on external conditions for happiness. This might mean taking a cold shower, skipping a meal, walking instead of driving, or having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. This practice isn't about being masochistic. It's about expanding your comfort zone and developing confidence in your ability to handle difficulty. When you know you can handle discomfort, you become less afraid of situations that might be challenging, and this fearlessness is attractive. The fifth practice is daily service. Look for one way each day to be genuinely helpful to someone without expecting recognition or reciprocation. This might be as simple as listening to a friend's problems, helping a colleague with a task, or expressing genuine appreciation to someone who serves you. This practice develops what the Stoics considered the foundation of virtue, concern for the common good. When you're focused on how you can contribute rather than what you can get, you naturally become more attractive because you're adding value to others' lives. The sixth practice is honest self-assessment. Once a week, take inventory of your character development. Are you becoming more patient, more generous, more courageous? Are you becoming less reactive, less needy, less concerned with others' opinions? This isn't about perfection. It's about progress and awareness. Create simple metrics for yourself. How many times this week did I react defensively to criticism? How often did I genuinely listen versus waiting to speak? When did I act from my values versus my impulses? This tracking helps you notice improvement over time and identify areas for continued growth. The seventh practice is philosophical study. Spend 15 minutes each day reading wisdom from the Stoics or other philosophical traditions that emphasize character development. Not to collect intellectual information, but to internalize principles that can guide your actions. Choose one principle each week to focus on implementing. Maybe it's Epictetus's reminder that you are not your reputation, or Marcus Aurelius's observation that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy, or Seneca's advice that we suffer more in imagination than reality. Let these principles guide your responses to daily challenges. The eighth practice is gratitude for difficulties. When you face challenges, instead of immediately complaining or seeking sympathy, first ask yourself what this situation might teach you or how it might strengthen you. This doesn't mean being grateful for truly tragic events, but rather finding growth opportunities in everyday frustrations and setbacks. This practice transforms you from someone who is defeated by difficulty to someone who is strengthened by it. And strength that has been tested is far more attractive than strength that has never been challenged. The ninth practice is emotional labeling. When you notice strong emotions arising, practice naming them specifically and observing them without being controlled by them. Instead of "I'm upset," try "I'm feeling frustrated because my expectations weren't met," or "I'm feeling anxious because I'm trying to control something outside my influence." This practice develops emotional intelligence and reduces the likelihood that you'll say or do something from emotional reactivity that you'll later regret. Emotional regulation is one of the most attractive qualities you can develop. The 10th practice is value-based decision-making. Before making decisions, both large and small, ask yourself, what would the person I want to become do in this situation? What choice aligns with my deepest values? This helps you act from character rather than impulse. These practices work because they gradually reshape your default responses. Instead of reacting from insecurity, you learn to respond from security. Instead of seeking validation, you learn to provide value. Instead of trying to control others' perceptions, you learn to control your own character. The transformation isn't immediate, but it is inevitable if you consistently practice. Day by day, interaction by interaction, you become someone who naturally attracts others, not because you're trying to, but because of who you've become through deliberate practice. As we conclude our exploration of Stoic attraction, remember this fundamental truth. The people who are most naturally magnetic have stopped trying to be magnetic. They've focused instead on becoming the kind of person they themselves would respect and want to be around. They've developed character, presence, and virtue not as strategies for attraction, but as ways of living with integrity. The ancient Stoics understood that true attraction comes from within. When you develop inner strength, emotional regulation, genuine curiosity about others, and a commitment to virtue, you naturally become someone others want to be around. You don't need techniques or tricks because your authentic self is attractive enough. This path isn't always easy, but it is simple. Focus on becoming rather than appearing. Develop your character rather than your image. Seek to understand others rather than impress them. Act from your values rather than your insecurities. Be present in conversations rather than planning your next performance. The world is full of people trying to get attention, but it's starved for people who give attention. It's full of people trying to be impressive, but it lacks people who are genuinely interested. It's full of people seeking validation, but it needs people who provide value. Your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to become one of those rare individuals who has done the inner work necessary to be naturally attractive. Not through manipulation or technique, but through genuine character development and authentic presence. Start with one practice. Choose the morning reflection, the mindful conversation, or the evening review. Commit to it for 30 days. Notice how it changes, not just how others respond to you, but how you feel about yourself. Notice how developing inner security creates outer magnetism, how focusing on giving rather than getting transforms your relationships. Remember Marcus Aurelius's words, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The same is true for attraction. Very little external change is needed to become genuinely magnetic. It is all within yourself, in your way of being. The most attractive version of yourself isn't someone you need to become. It's someone you already are beneath all the social conditioning, the fear, and the need for approval. The Stoic practices simply help you remove what isn't you, so that what is you can shine through. In a world of artificial attraction, be authentically attractive. In a world of desperate attention-seeking, be magnetically present. In a world of shallow connections, be deeply valuable. The world needs who you truly are, not who you think you should be. The ancient Stoics gave us a roadmap for becoming genuinely captivating that has worked for over 2,000 years. It will work for you too, if you have the courage to walk the path. The question isn't whether you can become naturally attractive. The question is whether you will choose to do the work required to let your natural attraction emerge. Your most magnetic self is waiting. The only question is, when will you meet them?